So I started my journey in caregiving at age 11 due to botched spinal surgery by my mom. The surgeon took out bones that he was not meant to do and did not put in the plates and screws that he should have. And she woke up unable to walk. And I think looking back as an adult, I wish I had spoken up or spoken out more, but I also understand why I didn't, and I understand that for other children too, why I think what happens within families, it's also is private too. Like, I wouldn't consider illness and disability dirty laundry, but I also recognize it also doesn't always look pretty. Those aren't always things that you want everyone to know about. So I also understand why there's practices of silence within families, but I also know that that's not good, right? If we don't talk about it, we don't know. If we don't talk about it and name it, we don't know what's happening.
Did you know that in 2020, there were 53 million caregivers in the United States? And by 2025, this number is expected to grow to 62.5 million. 73% of these caregivers also have a job. They are called working caregivers, and they are invisible because they don't talk about their caregiving challenges. Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees, is a podcast that will show you how to support working caregivers. Join Selma Archer and Zach Demopoulos on the Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast as they show you how to support working caregivers.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever and whenever you are dialing in. We appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And welcome to Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employee podcast. I'm Zach Demopoulos.
I'm Selma Archer. How you doing, Zach?
Selma. I'm good. I'm doing all right. Excited about our guest today. Excited.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This lady is just amazing. We met her, remember, as we were listening to the National Caregiver Summit in DC, and she was a speaker and just captivating. We just had to have her as a guest. So we are so excited to share our guest with you, Dr. Feylyn Lewis. Hi, Dr. Lewis. How are you? And welcome.
Thank you so much, Zach. Thank you so much for having me.
Hello.
Our pleasure. So we usually start out with a little icebreaker question, and we wanted to ask you, since you live in Nashville, what can you share with our audience about Nashville that's interesting or entertaining?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think everyone knows that Nashville's known as Music City. And
Yes.
I think when people hear that, they often think about our country music history.
Yes.
But the actually maybe little known fact is actually it reaches far, far back in history. So we became known as Music City from Queen Victoria because of the Fisk Jubilee Singers. So Fisk University is a HBCU right in town in Nashville, and the Jubilee Singers were a beautiful choir that would tour around the world. And when Queen Victoria heard them, she was like, Nashville is Music City. So that's actually where it comes from. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I'm from Nashville, and I didn't know that.
Yeah. Everyone thinks it's country music, but it goes far back.
Awesome.
Shout
Thank
out to
you so
royalty.
much. Thank you for sharing that. So let's start by having you share your amazing caregiver story. And the reason that we wanted so desperately to have you is because you became caregiver so very early in life as a child. So can you look back over that journey and just share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start off by telling a little bit about my story, and then I'll read a letter that I wrote as inspiration to myself as a youth caregiver. So I started my journey in caregiving at age 11 due to botched spinal surgery by my mom. The surgeon, unfortunately, he took out bones that he was not meant to do and did not put in the plates and screws that he should have. And she woke up unable to walk. And she was a healthy registered nurse before that, and our lives changed instantaneously.
Yes.
And because of that catastrophic surgery, I became what we know as a youth caregiver at age 11. And then my older brother, he dropped out of college so that he could take care of me and my mom at age 19. So we know him now as a young adult caregiver. But that started me on a journey of caregiving for my mother, doing intimate care, bathing, washing, helping her get dressed, doing medicine, administration at age 11. So it was definitely quite a journey, and one that I look back and I'm grateful for, but it was also very, very difficult. So I wanted to share this letter that I wrote as an inspiration to myself looking back as a youth caregiver. So, dear 11-year-old Feylyn, I know nothing makes sense to you. You can tell that something is wrong by the way the nurses whisper outside of the hospital room and the curt answers they give your mother while in the room. You wonder, what is going on? Your mother seems so small in the bed. Through her drugged post-operation stupor, you can tell that she is trying to connect the dots. All is not as it should be. You feel your stomach start to tie itself in knots. Will anyone explain the situation to you? No one does. Someone should have talked to you. A child life specialist should have come and taken you to the hospital cafeteria, given you an ice cream, and told you what happened to your mother. A nurse should have asked your mother, who resides at home with you besides an 11-year-old child? If asked, your mother would have said, no one. A social worker should have been called, but not to risk your way to foster care, to ensure that your mother had home health care workers and that you were in mental health counseling. I am so sorry that professionals failed you. Dear 12-year-old Feylyn, it is your first day of middle school. Your brother took you to school because your mother is now disabled and can no longer drive. A group of high school boys pushed you in the hallway and stole your glasses. A high school girl teased you for your dorky lunch bag. When you get in the car after school, your brother asks you how your first day went. You lie. It was great. You lie again when you see your mother. There is so much going on at home. This lie, like the bullying, continues for years. Your mother is wearing a back brace, her days spent in bed. Why bother her? You shrink yourself. Your mother did not stop being your mother just because she needed care. You deserve to have someone fight for you. You should have felt safe in school. You, like the millions of other youth caregivers, were bullied because you were different. There was nothing wrong with you. Your teacher should have checked in with you over and over again. Your guidance counselor should have asked you about your home life. Your school nurse should have asked you how you were really doing. They knew your mother was disabled. They should have helped you. You shouldn't have felt alone. It was not your fault. Dear 19-year-old Feylyn, you are a junior in college. Your mother is in the hospital. Your mind should be on writing essays for class, but instead you are worried that your mother might die. After class, you go to your mother's hospital room and sleep on a cot at her bedside. You think you should tell a friend. Isn't that what everyone always says? Open up and share? You tell your friend about your mother. Your friend is overwhelmed and does not know what to say. Never mind, you think. You won't make that mistake again. You ask your therapist for any books about young caregivers like you and your brother. He does not know of any. You feel very alone. Like many other young adult caregivers in college, you are balancing academics with caregiving without support. You should have been identified as a caregiver when you entered college in the same way England does for its university students on its common application form. Mental health practitioners should have known about youth caregivers and their unique needs. You should have been told that there are at least 5.4 million child caregivers and at least 10 million young adult caregivers in the United States. You weren't alone. You just didn't know it. Every time an adult failed you, you used it for good. You consider your life's work in research and advocacy to make sure other youth caregivers never feel alone like you did. I am so proud of you.
Wow. That is amazing. It's so powerful. I mean, it's just unforgettable, really. It
Thank you.
really is. So many powerful statements. One thing you said I think you were 12, you said when you come home from school and when you talk to your mom, you would lie and say everything was fine.
Yeah.
But you said you shrank yourself. Can you tell us about that? You shrank yourself. That's really powerful to say as a child. What does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think like on reflection, myself, like so many other youth caregivers, we very much understand the weight and the difficulty, the challenges, all that's going on in the home when there's still illness and disability, addiction, the doctor's appointments, the threat of medical bills piling up. A child is very in tune to the dynamics of a household. Even if adults may want to try to shield the child out of protection, children pick up on that. And I know I certainly did at that young age. I knew that there was stress and strain in our home. And for me, even though obviously, when I look back, I think, oh, I should have told someone. I should have told my mom that I was being bullied. But the reality is, I know my mom. She would have marched up to my school in her back brace and made sure those kids left me alone. But at that young age, I was trying to take on too much. And I know that now as an adult, but I think as a child, and especially as a caregiver, as a youth caregiver, you're trying to take on so many adult responsibilities. And that includes trying to manage and make everybody else feel okay. And doing a little bit too much as a child. And I recognize that now, upon reflection as an adult.
Wow.
Dr. Lewis, 11, 12 years old. There's so many millions of other things you should be doing as a young child, right? I mean, that is incredible. I also was lucky enough to hear your talk at the National Alliance for Caregiving's Caregiver Summit. And I wish I was in the room because I imagine you moved quite a few people.
Yes.
Since then, yeah, I bet, right?
The whole
Selma, you were
room, the
there.
whole room was in tears,
Yeah,
really.
was
Yeah,
tears, right?
for sure.
Well, you should listen to her TEDx talk too. So I did some research and I listened to your TEDx talk after that. And I want to share a line with you because this is just so much for 11 and 12-year-old to take on. But you shared in your TEDx talk, and we'll put a link in our show notes for our listeners to check it out. It's powerful. But you said, you prayed that you prayed to God every day that you would take on your mom's pain. And then you would wake up in the next day and you didn't have it. And so can you just share a little more about how did you deal with that? Maybe, in terms of as a young child, that is a strong emotional burden to be carrying on.
Yeah.
And how did you adjust to it? And how did you overcome it?
Yeah. Thank you, Zach. That's a excellent question. I think as a child, I think you repress and suppress those complex and complicated emotions. That prayer to give the pain to me rather than my mother, that's out of love, right? Like I saw my mother in pain and that was painful to see her that way as a child. And, now that I'm an adult, thankfully through years of therapy, so shout out to therapists, I can definitely recognize that's traumatic, actually. What's happening to children and adolescents in caregiving roles, that's actually a lot of trauma. And that's why I really cannot preach enough about the important role of mental health practitioners because of that. And for me, I think in terms of overcoming it, I don't know if I could say I've overcame because I'm still a caregiver for my mother. I still have that fear that feels irrational, but that's really just there out of love and wanting to make sure that she's safe and okay. And I think when we look back for youth caregivers, I think what helps address some of those complicated emotions is education. So having a trusted adult be able to sit down with that child or teenager and explain what's going on with their family member, being able to have them give them the opportunity to ask questions and have answers and just have a safe space for them to talk things out. That's something that I didn't have as a child. And I think that's why I repressed and suppressed everything.
Yes.
But, looking back now, we know more and you can see, okay, yes, this is why professionals are so important. They could have intervened and it could have been so much different.
Well, just to follow up, also in your TED talk, and then also listening to your letter, you put a charge out there. You put a challenge to our country. You really you really said something powerful. You called us an emerging country, which you're right. I mean, out of all the established countries out there, we rank like 37th in terms of caring for working caregivers, in terms of family leave and being more supportive. And this isn't about poo-pooing our country. We love our country, but this is the charge to do more. In your letter, you shared how, professionals were coming to you, but you would expect support and help. And instead, you got moved around and pretty much treated like a child. Selma and I have had conversations in this podcast with others who have said providers, healthcare providers, need to also kind of step up. Instead of saying you have cancer, maybe they need to turn to the caregiver and say, okay, here's what you also need to be aware of as a caregiver. What do you see? Just maybe one quick, if you don't mind sharing, what's the solution to some of this? How can we do a better job with this in society?
Yeah. Gosh, where's my magic wand?
Just one thing.
Just one. What I hear from children directly, it goes back to who they are, which is that love and devotion that they have for that family member that they're caring for. And they always say, if the person that's sick in my family or ill or disabled, if they have what they need, then that lessens the amount of caring that I have to do as a young person. So I really have to say we have to advocate in our country for the disabled, for the sick, for the ill, for the addicted person, because theoretically that rising tide lifts all boats. So if we do more for them, then that lessens the load, I think, for caregivers across the board. I mean, I think that's absolutely just one thing. There's many other things I think we should do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So just wondering, as a child, you said you did not have that support from adults as a child caregiver. Has that changed as caregiving has evolved over the years? Do you have now the support that you need in caring for your mom? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I would say I'm very privileged in that I'm married now. So I have my husband and we live with my mother. And, but it's still very difficult. Even with my older brother living a mile down the street, we're all working adults. And really, I say I identify as millennial and we both are in the middle age and approaching middle age. So we're balancing that time in our career where we're really meant to focus on, career advancement. But yet we're juggling coordination of doctor's appointments and therapy appointments. And I know certainly for me, and I say this not in a complaint at all because I recognize the privilege that I have, but as a middle class person, I fall in the gap. So I'm not eligible for any of the social services. So there's no outside care workers coming into our home, and I certainly couldn't afford to pay that out of pocket. So, I'm thankful that I have a job that allows me to take her to her appointments and therapy appointments as needed. But it's hard. I would not lie to you and say that it was easy to coordinate, but it's not, it's exhausting. Certainly I'm having to burn, what is that phrase? Burn candles at both ends to try to make everything work as a working caregiver. And it's difficult. But again, I do it because one, I don't have a choice, right? The system isn't stepping in and the system won't step in. And two, I do it out of the love and honor that I have for my mother, but it's hard.
I'd like to talk a little bit about today and what you're doing now, which is amazing work. I listened to also when I was doing my research on you, listened to a great podcast or a segment of it, Black Scholars Speak, with this incredibly young lady who probably she's putting us to shame, Selma. You should see this podcast host. She was amazing. The question she asked you was incredibly deep. So I kind of want to rephrase that question and get you to share that with our audience. And I'll put it in this format, since we have employers, HR, managers listening to us who may never have had a caregiver experience, right? So you took your caregiver experience and it really impacted what you do now. Can you share how that shaped what you do now? And then also maybe if you could share, like you did with the podcast host, even if you don't have a caregiving experience, something about the authentic truth that you talked about, maybe you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, shout out to her. She's an amazing podcaster. When I was doing my master's in counseling, and I did a little mini dissertation, and I did it on young adult caregivers, and I realized that there's a wealth of research and advocacy work for younger age caregivers, but much of it wasn't happening in our country. It was happening in England, and that's why you mentioned about us being an emerging country. We're about 30 years behind in the field for youth caregivers. So I went over there to study, and that's really become what I call my life's work. So being able to advocate and learn more about the experiences of children and adolescents who have caregiving roles in their family. That's something I'm incredibly passionate about. I've been able to lead research projects around the world, primarily in Europe, but also here in the United States. And through all of that, I recognize that we have so much to do as our country, for our country and within it. But I also know that our caregivers are the one who are really supporting our social care network and our healthcare network. They're doing the frontline work day in and day out. And it's important that we recognize that. I think you had asked as well about the work I'm doing now. I'm really, really pleased about the work we were able to do with the Tennessee Caregiver Coalition. That's a premier respite organization in Tennessee. We were able to have the first ever peer support group in a local Nashville high school, the first time ever in our state. So we were excited to have that off the ground last year and be able to actually have a supportive intervention for young people in high school who are caregivers. And that's the kind of work that fuels me. That's what motivates me. That's how I seek fulfillment, is because I want to take what happened to me and my brother, and I never want anyone else to feel as alone and as isolated as we did. So it motivates the work that I do.
And just one more thing about the Tennessee Coalition, Caregiver Coalition. I know a lot of states have things like that, but how does somebody benefit from that, let's say, in the state of Tennessee?
Yeah. So if you are a caregiver, or you know someone who is, definitely reach out to the Tennessee Caregiver Coalition. They can provide respite vouchers. And when we say respite, that's a fancy word for taking a break, as we know caregivers need. But it also, not only is it taking a break, it also ensures that that person that you have care for, that they also have somebody to step in who's a professional to take care of that loved one for you during that time that you take a break. It's been great for me as a newlywed to be able to have a respite voucher and take a vacation with my husband. Like, we need that time as a caregiver to have your own, your own life, your own interests, have a restorative time to yourself. So I highly encourage anyone, definitely, I know there's a wide respite network around the country. So definitely make sure that you check out in your local area, because you truly do. You truly need a break. It's so cliche to say that you can't pour from an empty cup, but it's true. You will burn yourself out in caregiving, and it will not be sustainable if you do not engage in healthy restorative practices. So please, please, please check out organizations like the Tennessee Caregiver Coalition or your respite organization in your state.
In terms of the research that's out there on youth caregiving, I found it very interesting because there's different levels of caregiving, and as adults as well as youth. We traditionally see young people walking the dog for the care recipient, or feeding the cat, or fluffing their pillow, or bringing them a glass of water, things like that, which you could expect a child to be able to do with not a problem. But your caregiving experience was on the adult level. You were helping with daily life activities, bathing, lifting, transferring, all those type of things as a 11-year-old child. So I just wonder, what can you share about the things that you learned as a child caregiver, as well as things maybe that you have learned as an adult?
I think the first thing is to recognize how young this is happening. So I was age 11, and we talk about inappropriate activities that children are doing. But through research, I've seen where children as young as elementary and toddler age are giving injections. So we know that this is happening at inappropriate levels. And I think that's always really important to name and recognize. You asked, what did I learn? I learned that I am stronger than I ever could have thought. I don't see myself as a particularly, strong-willed person, but when life really hits, you recognize, like, hey, I'm different than my peers. Like, we've had very different experiences. Yeah, maybe I'm tougher than I think I am.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I see that, that I'm very persistent. And I think to be able to do my research degree, I definitely needed that, like that gumption, that sense of no one's going to stop me. I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And I know that's
I love
because
it.
of being a youth caregiver. I think maybe one of the things I'm most proud of, and I see this reflected in the children and other teens that I get to interview with my research, is the amount of care for those who are different and vulnerable. That's what I think truly comes from being a youth caregiver. You understand very intimately what it's like to be different and to care for someone else. And I actually think that's a beautiful thing. I will
Absolutely.
always be the academic who says, I don't necessarily want to stop youth caregiving. I want to put
Mhm.
structures and buffers around it so that children can feel free to go to school, feel free to have playtime after school, join clubs, have friends, etc. But caregiving within, boundaries, within healthy boundaries, I think care is a good thing. I think it's I think it's a beautiful, wonderful, moral thing to take care of those who are old, those who are sick. I think that's a wonderful
Yes.
thing in a society. And I think it's even good, even when young people engage in it, because of what it teaches us about love and care for someone else. So I never want to stop that. But I think we have to make sure that kids are not doing inappropriate amounts of care or
Yes.
activities, that are age inappropriate for them. That's what I think is important. But I love that sense of being empathetic that I think comes from being a youth caregiver. And I see that in other children. And I think that's amazing.
You mentioned in your letter that you shared your journey or your what you were going through as a child with another kid in your class, and it just kind of went over their head. They had no idea. They couldn't
Yeah.
understand it. I was
Yeah.
wondering, did you share with any adult at school, like a teacher or counselor or anything? Did anyone else know what you were dealing with?
Yeah, so I did not share to my teachers. They knew that my mother had a botched spinal surgery, knew she could no longer work, knew my brother was taking me to school, but we didn't have a language for it. We didn't call it youth caregiving back then. I think now that's starting to change. I'm really grateful to you both for wanting to amplify this message and get it out there and label what children are doing for families. But so I think people know what you're doing, but they don't think and don't recognize it as caregiving. And I think it's important that we do that. One, because, when you think about advocacy work and lobbying work, we have to have a label for something. If we don't label, if we don't name it, then what is it? It's just floating
Yeah.
out there. And then when
Yeah.
it's an abstract thing, but
Yeah.
yet when we know that there's millions of children and adolescents who are doing this, we are a group. We are a large contingent of population.
Yeah.
So no it's a short answer is no, I didn't say anything. And I think, like many other children, I think I was just so focused on like, don't make a fuss, just, focus and do well in school.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's where my attention was. I think looking back as an adult, I wish I certainly I wish I had spoken up or spoken out, more, but I also understand why I didn't,
Yes.
and I understand that for other children too, why I think what happens within families, it's also is private too. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider illness and disability dirty laundry, but I also recognize it also doesn't always look pretty either. So, and
Yes.
especially
Yes.
think about other stigmatizing conditions that somebody might have, like a mental health issue or a substance abuse issue. Those aren't always things that you want everyone to know about. So I also
True.
understand why there's
Yeah.
practices of silence within families, but I also know that that's not good, right? If we don't talk about it,
Yeah.
we don't know. If we don't talk about it,
Yeah.
name it, we don't know what's happening.
Well,
100%.
one of the things
100%.
that Zach and I do as well, we always try to encourage people to, when you know someone is struggling through a caregiver journey, don't wait for them to ask you for help. You go to them and say, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to bring you a meal. I'm going to sit with your mom while you go skating,
Yeah.
whatever, but offer to do something. So that's part of our advocacy as well as it's letting people know it's okay. It's okay
Mhm.
to do that. You don't have to know the details of what's going on in the household to just reach out and offer
Yeah.
support. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
one of the big things that we have to keep advocating about because
Mhm.
people don't know.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
a silo from both ends. The
Yes.
person doesn't
So
say
true.
for whatever reasons, and people who
Yeah.
could help don't because they
Yeah.
don't ask, they don't feel comfortable. So we're trying to
Mhm.
bridge that gap.
Yes, that's so important. And you know what I see as well, Selma and Zach, with children is I think there's also this fear of social service involvement as well. And we
Yes,
see that start to come out in some of our research. Yeah, is
yes,
that they'll say that they're afraid that they're going to get taken out of the home.
yes, yes,
And,
Yeah.
yes.
you know,
I've
I
seen
think
that.
it's always really important to make a distinction between abuse and
Definitely.
neglect and youth
Yes,
caregiving. Very
yes,
different. Very
very much. How old was your mom at the time?
Oh, so she would have been early 40s. Yeah, early. So young in
Wow.
her career
Wow.
too. Yes.
Yes.
Wow.
Oh,
Yes.
that's
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
It
devastating.
sounds like we need to multiply you 50 times and get you into each state and talk to the school systems and get these conversations going, because you're not going to get a disagreement from us that caregiving brings so much value, even
Yeah.
to a young child. You know, there's talk about bringing financial literacy to a younger age in school systems. I think caregiving now needs to be
Yeah.
brought to a younger age. My last question for you, Dr. Lewis, again, this has been fantastic. And you have already hinted to this in what you just said earlier, but let's add a PS to your letter, PS to yourself. And in there, could you share with us what you would tell yourself at 11 years old before that surgery to prepare yourself? Hey, here's one thing that you really need to make sure you do to help kind of make this journey a little easier on yourself.
What a profound question. Wow. What would I say before? I would say to myself before the surgery that the road ahead of you is incredibly difficult and is paved with challenges that will seem insurmountable, but you can do it. Your faith will carry you through. The love that you have will carry you through. And when you feel in those moments late at night that you can't do another day, you can. You can. And yeah, just keep going. Just keep going. Yeah.
Wow.
You should write a book. Have
Wow.
you ever thought about that?
I'd love to write it back, but the time,
Yeah.
just like if there could be more hours in the day, I wish. But, yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
That was
I
incredible.
love
Very
this.
good. Thank you.
Very much so.
No,
Yeah.
thank you all. It's such a privilege to be here with you all. Thank you for hearing the message of youth caregivers. Thank
Thank you for
you.
not calling this security on me as I was stalking you at the at the meeting, trying to get to know you. So, but it's just wonderful.
We're looking forward to hearing more about you, and let's bring the word carers to America too, right? You did so much great stuff across the pond. Let's unite. In fact, Selma and I have had global podcast with Canada. We're scheduling one in the future with India. Love to do one with UK if you have some suggested folks.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We could do one.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There's fantastic folks over there.
Well, thank you so much for being here. You're
Yeah.
amazing.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to catch new episodes of Working Caregivers, the Invisible Employees podcast, every other Tuesday. Please also visit our website, invisibleemployeeadvocates.com, to subscribe to our newsletter, purchase our book, and learn more about how we can help you strengthen your workplace to become more supportive of working caregivers.